Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to talk about money and the Federal Reserve, the structure of the Federal Reserve, chapter 14. So when you look at the lecture notes, we start the chapter by defining money. So know the definition of money, know the characteristics of money. They're easy to read, but you have to remember them. The main important part of this chapter is about the structure of the Federal Reserve, the monetary system in United States, and also the money market. I might break down these topics in different videos because I want to talk especially about the structure of the Federal Reserve and things like that. So let me start with talking about monetary system. So, and remember, this chapter is about the money system only in United States and the Federal Reserve in United States. So it could be different in other countries. So in the monetary system, we have the Federal Reserve at top, which is the central bank in United States. And then at the bottom of our monetary system, we have basically different financial institutions like commercial banks, saving banks, credit unions, money market funds. If you look at my notes on D12, I mentioned something about that. I'm not going to ask about commercial banks, thrift institutions, money market funds. Go ahead and read them if you want to learn more about commercial banks. But I know that this chapter is kind of long, so by skipping this part, I'm trying to make it a little bit shorter, and I want you guys to be focused on the more important topics in this chapter. One thing, however, you need to know from the commercial bank section is one important definition, which is about the Fed funds rate or federal funds rate that we have under the commercial bank. There are two important interest rates in this chapter that you need to know, and one of them is this federal funds rate. So let me give you an example. So let's say we're talking about Bank of America. Bank of America is short in terms of funds and money. It needs to borrow money from somebody, okay? Because of multiple reasons, he wants to give loans to his customers. Federal Reserve is asking the Bank of America to keep more money at the Federal Reserve, something we will discuss about them in this chapter. So for multiple reasons, the Bank of America is looking for funds. The Bank of America right now has two choices. Bank of America can go directly to another commercial bank, let's say like Chase, who has extra money, extra reserve, or excess reserves, okay? So Bank of America goes to Chase, borrows money. Typically, these loans are called overnight, so they're basically short-term loans. The interest rate on this loan that Bank of America is getting from the Chase is called federal funds rate and is approved by the Federal Reserve. So Federal Reserve basically can control the federal funds rate, okay? So the interest rate on this loan that Bank of America is getting directly from Chase is called federal funds rate. Another option that Bank of America has here is to go to the Federal Reserve and directly borrow money from the Federal Reserve. The interest rate that Bank of America is now going to pay to the Federal Reserve is called discount rate. So we have discount rate and we have federal funds rate. So make sure you know their definitions. What the Bank of America is going to do at the end of the day, just like us individuals, Bank of America looks into these two interest rates, whichever is lower, the Bank of America is going to borrow money from that source. So if the federal funds rate is lower than the discount rate, Bank of America is going to borrow from Chase. If the discount rate is lower than the than the Fed funds rate, the Bank of America will borrow directly from the Federal Reserve. Okay, so we're going to skip commercial banks, thrift institution, and money market funds part, but you need to know the federal funds rate definition because that's very important. Now let's talk about the Federal Reserve and the structure of the Federal Reserve. So Federal Reserve, as I said, is a central bank in the United States, and we kind of have a unique system for our central bank. Unlike any other countries, we have 12 Federal Reserve, 12 regional Federal Reserve, and it's because of the size of the United States, our country. So we have we have a Federal Reserve, we have a Federal Reserve, let's say in Chicago, we have a Federal Reserve in San Francisco, we have one in St. Louis, one in Dallas, one in New York. So we have 12 regional Federal Reserve, and then we have head Fed, or the head of the Federal Reserve, which is at Washington, D.C. That's where the boss of Federal Reserve, or the chairman of the Federal Reserve, actually is Washington, D.C. Okay. For each regional Federal Reserve, remember, we have one president, and then we have the chairman of the Federal Reserve, which is in charge of the entire Federal Reserve. And many people believe that the chairman is probably chairman of the Federal Reserve is probably the second powerful person in the United States after the president, okay? Because he is in charge of interest rate, dealing with the money market, the supply of money, everything. So he's very, very powerful. So we have the chairman of the Federal Reserve at top of the Fed. Then we have the Board of Governors. Chairman of the Federal Reserve is also part of the Board of Governors. We have these 12 regional Federal Reserve. And then the most important part of the Federal Reserve, which all the policies and all the practices in the money market is coming from this committee, which is called FOMC. Federal Open Market Committee. What does it mean by open? It means that it's open to public. So whenever the Federal Reserve wants to change, let's say, the supply of money in the market or the interest rate in the market, the FOMC is in charge of running all these policies, and all the important decisions about the money market is coming from FOMC. And again, the chairman of the Federal Reserve and the Board of Governors are part of this FOMC, okay? So the policy tools that we're going to discuss, Federal Reserve policy tools, these are the things that FOMC actually is dealing with. In the FOMC, another important basically person we have after the chairman of board of governors is the president of the Federal Reserve in New York. That's why Wall Street is very important, right? That's why New York City actually is very important in terms of money market, interest rate, and everything basically that is related to money. So we always have the president of New York, Federal Reserve in New York, in the FOMC meetings. We also have other presidents of the regional Federal Reserves, but they have these basically rotating kind of position, so they are not there permanently, unlike the chairman and the Board of Governors and the president of New York. In the next video, I will talk about Federal Reserve policy tools. See you.